Thank you, Madam Chair, and for your consideration on the timeliness. So thanks for this hearing. I'm also on the Financial Services Committee, so we've sort of wrestled with this issue in that committee. Good to see it here. It's obvious to me that this needs to be done in collaboration. I think it's clear to me that we have to better adapt to a changing climate and take proactive steps that ensure Americans are protected from harm. One way to do that is to make sure that we're not building new homes or businesses in areas that have the potential to be wiped out. I'd like to start with Mr. Grimm. In your testimony, you highlighted the significant increase in annual flood losses since the 80s. In your estimation, what percentage of today's NFIP costs are associated with repetitive loss properties?
And repetitive loss properties create a significant drain on the National Flood Insurance Program. Those are the properties that flood repeatedly. Many of them are outside of the floodplain, which causes the issue around the mapping program in terms of getting to mapping beyond the binary line. I'll have to get back to you on the exact percentage that is the drain on the number of claims on the program. It is significant. What I'd like to draw the attention to, though, is on the mapping program, moving away from the binary in and out nature of our flood maps.
Yep.
As one of the members pointed out, in 1968, when the maps were originally designed to be an insurance tool, many communities and states and local governments have moved well beyond that. We have to move away from that to a graduated risk analysis so that we can address those areas that flood outside of the current flood mapped area.
Can an individual today build a property in a flood-prone region and expect to be eligible for insurance coverage from NFIP?
In a participating community in the National Flood Insurance Program, flood insurance is available for anybody inside a special flood hazard area or outside of a special flood hazard area.
I mean, it seems to me that this sort of behavior should be discouraged. I mean, if the way I look at this from a climate standpoint or an energy standpoint is we're very early stages with respect to what will probably be a multi-decade energy transition. Unless somebody can tell me that they can make steel, cement, plastic, or ammonia without fossil fuels, I have no idea how to do that at scale without them. And so I think we're very, very early stages. And so adaptation has to be central to the discussion and mitigation. And that's, I don't know that we spend enough time on that, frankly, with respect to the flood program, but talking about energy issues, period, is just the realities of where we are currently at in the energy transition and what it's going to take and how long it's going to take to get there. I think multi-decades at minimum. I'll stick with you, Mr. Grimm, for my last question. As you noticed in your testimony in 2015, TMAC recommended FEMA incorporate future flood hazard conditions. To this date, however, FEMA continues to only look at current risk. What specific steps is FEMA taking to incorporate this change, and what have been the biggest barriers to seeing it through?
Sure. Yeah, FEMA continues to consider all the recommendations of the Mapping Advisory Council around future conditions. They recommend for non-regulatory products looking at future conditions. To date, we've done a number of pilot efforts. I mentioned one in my oral testimony that we're currently working with New York City on sea level rise. We've also done a few others around the nation on the West Coast, as well as some inland areas and some erosion, future erosion potential. As I mentioned, I think as Chad mentioned, there's 3.5 million miles of streams in the United States. We've only mapped 1.1 million miles. Our resources and the decisions that we've had to make around with state and local governments is to focus those resources in those higher risk areas that we have made the assumption on insurance policies and population. Therefore, there are certain things that we have not been able to directly attack in the sense of future conditions on every flood map. What we do is we look to our partners such as NOAA and the Sea Level Rise Viewer and other technologies. Chad also mentioned and Mark mentioned Atlas 14 and keeping that up to date so that we can incorporate the appropriate data and technologies, and particularly around the Sea Level Viewer.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Lamb from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes